Section 29 of 3 Lives. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jacquelyn Bengfort. 3 Lives by Gertrude STEIN. Section 29, The Gentle Lena. So Lena was feeling a little better when she got off the car, and the conductor helped her, and he called out to her, "You be sure you keep up a good heart now. He wasn't no good, that feller, and you were lucky for to lose him. You'll get a real man yet, one that will be better for you. Don't you be worried, you're a real nice girl as I ever see in such trouble." And the conductor shook his head and went back into his car to talk it over with the other passengers he had there. The German cook, who always scolded Lena, was very angry when she heard the story. She never did think Mrs. Haydon would do so much for Lena, though she was always talking so grand about what she could do for everybody. The good German cook always had been a little distrustful of her. People who always thought they were so much never did really do things right for anybody. Not that Mrs. Haydon wasn't a good woman. Mrs. Haydon was a real, good German woman, and she did really mean to do well by her niece Lena. The cook knew that very well, and she had always said so, and she always had liked and respected Mrs. Haydon, who always acted very proper to her. And Lena was so backward, when there was a man to talk to. Mrs. Haydon did have hard work when she tried to marry Lena. Mrs. Haydon was a good woman, only she did talk sometimes too grand. Perhaps this trouble would make her see it wasn't always so easy to make everybody do everything just like she wanted. The cook was very sorry now for Mrs. Haydon. All this must be such a disappointment, and such a worry to her, and she really had always been very good to Lena. But Lena had better go and put on her other clothes and stop all that crying. That wouldn't do nothing now to help her, and if Lena would be a good girl and just be real patient, her aunt would make it all come out right yet for her. "I just tell Mrs. Aldrich, Lena, you stay here yet a little longer. You know she is always so good to you, Lena, and I know she let you, and I tell her all about that stupid Herman Creeder. I got no patience, Lena, with anybody who can be so stupid. You just stop now with your crying, Lena, and take off them good clothes and put them away so you don't spoil them when you need them, and you can help me with the dishes, and everything will come off better for you. You see if I ain't right by what I tell you. You just stop crying now, Lena, quick, or else I scold you." Lena still choked a little, and was very miserable inside her, but she did everything just as the cook told her. The girls Lena always sat with were very sorry to see her look so sad with her trouble. Mary, the Irish girl, sometimes got very angry with her. Mary was always very hot when she talked to Lena's Aunt Matilda, who thought she was so grand, and had such stupid, stuck-up daughters. Mary wouldn't be a fat fool like that ugly-tempered Matilda Haydon, not for anything anybody could ever give her. How Lena could keep on going there so much, when they all always acted as if she was just dirt to them, Mary never could see. But Lena never had any sense of how she should make people stand round for her, and that was always all the trouble with her. And poor Lena, she was so stupid to be sorry for losing that gawky fool who didn't ever know what he wanted and just said "yah" to his mama and his papa like a baby, and was scared to look at a girl straight, and then sneaked away the last day like as if somebody was going to do something to him. Disgrace! Lena talking about disgrace! It was a disgrace for a girl to be seen with the likes of him, let alone to be married to him. But that poor Lena, she never did know how to show herself off for what she was really. Disgrace to have him go away and leave her. Mary would just like to get a chance to show him. If Lena wasn't worth 15 like Herman Creeder, Mary would just eat her own head all up. It was a good riddance Lena had of that Herman Creeder and his stingy, dirty parents, and if Lena didn't stop crying about it, Mary would just naturally despise her. Poor Lena, she knew very well how Mary meant it all. This she was always saying to her. But Lena was very miserable inside her. She felt the disgrace it was for a decent German girl that a man should go away and leave her. Lena knew very well that her aunt was right when she said the way Herman had acted to her was a disgrace to everyone that knew her. Mary and Nellie and the other girls she always sat with were always very good to Lena, but that did not make her trouble any better. It was a disgrace the way Lena had been left to any decent family, and that could never be made any different to her. And so the slow days wore on, and Lena never saw her Aunt Matilda. At last on Sunday she got word by a boy to go and see her Aunt Matilda. Lena's heart beat quick, for she was very nervous now with all this that had happened to her. She went just as quickly as she could to see her Aunt Matilda. Mrs. Hayden Quick, as soon as she saw Lena, began to scold her for keeping her aunt waiting so long for her, and for not coming in all the week to see her, to see if her aunt should need her, and so her aunt had to send a boy to tell her. But it was easy, even for Lena, to see that her aunt was not really angry with her. It wasn't Lena's fault, went on Mrs. Hayden, that everything was going to happen all right for her. Mrs. Hayden was very tired taking all this trouble for her, and when Lena couldn't even take trouble to come and see her aunt, to see if she needed anything to tell her. But Mrs. Hayden really never minded things like that, when she could do things for anybody. She was tired now, all the trouble she had been taking to make things right for Lena, but perhaps now Lena heard it, she would learn a little to be thankful to her. "You get all ready to be married Tuesday, Lena, you hear me?" said Mrs. Hayden to her. "You come here Tuesday morning, and I have everything all ready for you. You wear your new dress I got you, and your hat with all them flowers on it, and you be very careful coming you don't get your things all dirty. You so careless all the time, Lena, and not thinking. And you act sometimes you never got no head at all on you. You go home now, and you tell your Mrs. Aldrich that you leave her Tuesday. Don't you go forgetting now, Lena, anything I ever told you what you should do to be careful. You be a good girl now, Lena. You get married Tuesday to Herman Kreder." And that was all Lena ever knew of what had happened all this week to Herman Kreder. Lena forgot there was anything to know about it. She was really to be married Tuesday, and her Aunt Matilda said she was a good girl, and now there was no disgrace left upon her. Lena now fell back into the way she always had of being always dreamy and not there, the way she always had been, except for the few days she was so excited because she had been left by a man the very day she was to have been married. Lena was a little nervous all these last days, but she did not think much about what it meant for her to be married. Herman Kreder was not so content about it. He was quiet and was sullen, and he knew he could not help it. He knew now he just had to let himself get married. It was not that Herman did not like Lena Maines. She was as good as any other girl could be for him. She was a little better perhaps than other girls he saw. She was so very quiet. But Herman did not like to always have to have a girl around him. Herman had always done everything that his mother and his father wanted. His father had found him in New York, where Herman had gone to be with his married sister. Herman's father, when he had found him, coaxed Herman a long time and went on whole days with his complaining to him, always troubled but gentle and quite patient with him, and always he was worrying to Herman about what was the right way his boy Herman should always do, always whatever it was his mother ever wanted from him, and always Herman never made him any answer. Old Mr. Kreder kept on saying to him, he did not see how Herman could think now it could be any different. When you make a bargain, you just got to stick right to it. That was the only way old Mr. Kreder could ever see it. And saying you would get married to a girl and she got everything all ready, that was a bargain, just like one you make in business. And Herman, he had made it. And now Herman, he would just have to do it. Old Mr. Kreder didn't see there was any other way a good boy like his Herman had to do it. And then, too, that Lena Maines was such a nice girl, and Herman hadn't ought to really give his father so much trouble and make him pay out all that money to come all the way to New York just to find him. And they both lose all that time from their working, when all Herman had to do was just to stand up for an hour, and then he would be all right married, and it would be all over for him, and then everything at home would never be any different to him. And his father went on. There was his poor mother saying always how her Herman always did everything before she ever wanted, and now, just because he got notions in him, and wanted to show people how he could be stubborn, he was making all this trouble for her, and making them pay all that money just to run around and find him. "You got no idea, Herman, how bad Mama is feeling about the way you've been acting, Herman," said old Mr. Creeder to him. "She says she never can understand how you can be so thankless, Herman. It hurts her very much you've been so stubborn, and she finds you such a nice girl for you like Lena Maines, who is always just so quiet and always saves up all her wages, and she never wanting her own way at all like some girls are always all the time to have it, and your mama trying so hard just so you could be comfortable, Herman, to be married, and then you act so stubborn, Herman. You like all young people, Herman. You think only about yourself and what you are just wanting, and your mama, she is thinking only what is good for you to have, for you in the future. Do you think your mama wants to have a girl around to be a bother for herself, Herman? It's just for you, Herman, she is always thinking, and she talks always about how happy she will be when she sees her Herman married to a nice girl, and then when she fixed it all up so good for you, so it never would be any bother to you, just the way she wanted, you should like it, and you say, 'Yes, all right, I do it,' and then you go away like this and act stubborn, and make all this trouble, everybody to take for you, and we spend money, and I got to travel all round to find you. You come home now with me, Herman, and get married, and I tell your mama she better not say anything to you about how much it cost me to come all the way to look for you." "Hey, Herman," said his father, coaxing. "Hey, you come home now and get married. All you got to do, Herman, is just to stand up for an hour, Herman, and then you don't never to have any more bother to it. Hey, Herman, you come home with me tomorrow and get married. Hey, Herman." Herman's married sister liked her brother Herman, and she had always tried to help him when there was anything she knew he wanted. She liked it that he was so good and always did everything that their father and their mother wanted, but still, she wished it could be that he could have more his own way, if there was anything he ever wanted. End of section 29. Section 30 of 3 Lives. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jacquelyn Bengfort. 3 Lives by Gertrude STEIN. Section 30. The Gentle Lena. But now she thought Herman with his girl was very funny. She wanted that Herman should be married. She thought it would do him lots of good to get married. She laughed at Herman when she heard the story. Until his father came to find him, she did not know why it was Herman had come just then to New York to see her. When she heard the story, she laughed a good deal at her brother Herman, and teased him a good deal about his running away, because he didn't want to have a girl to be all the time around him. Herman's married sister liked her brother Herman, and she did not want him not to like to be with women. He was good, her brother Herman, and it would surely do him good to get married. It would make him stand up for himself stronger. Herman's sister always laughed at him, and always she would try to reassure him. "Such a nice man as my brother Herman, acting like as if he was afraid of women. Why, all the girls all like a man like you, Herman, if you didn't always run away when you saw them. It do you good, really, Herman, to get married, and then you got somebody you can boss around when you want to. It do you good, Herman, to get married. You see, if you don't like it, when you really done it, you go along home now with Papa, Herman, and get married to that Lena. You don't know how nice you like it, Herman, when you try once how you can do it. You just don't be afraid of nothing, Herman. You good enough for any girl to marry, Herman. Any girl be glad to have a man like you to be always with them, Herman. You just go along home with Papa and try it what I say, Herman. Oh, you so funny, Herman, when you sit there and then run away and leave your girl behind you. I know she is crying like anything, Herman, for to lose you. Don't be bad to her, Herman. You go along home with Papa now and get married, Herman. I'd be awful ashamed, Herman, to really have a brother didn't have spirit enough to get married when a girl is just dying for to have him. You always like me to be with you, Herman. I don't see why you say you don't want a girl to be all the time around you. You always been good to me, Herman, and I know you always be good to that Lena, and you soon feel just like as if she had always been there with you. Don't act like as if you wasn't a nice strong man, Herman. Really, I laugh at you, Herman, but you know, I like awful well to see you real happy. You go home and get married to that Lena, Herman. She is a real pretty girl, and real nice and good and quiet, and she make my brother Herman very happy. You just stop your fussing now with Herman, Papa. He go with you tomorrow, Papa, and you see, he like it so much to be married. He make everybody laugh just to see him be so happy. Really, truly, that's the way it will be with you, Herman. You just listen to me what I tell you, Herman. And so his sister laughed at him and reassured him, and his father kept on telling what the mother always said about her Herman, and he coaxed him, and Herman never said anything in answer, and his sister packed his things up and was very cheerful with him, and she kissed him, and then she laughed, and then she kissed him, and his father went and bought the tickets for the train, and at last, late on Sunday, he brought Herman back to Bridgeport with him. It was always very hard to keep Mrs. Creeder from saying what she thought to her Herman, but her daughter had written her a letter so as to warn her not to say anything about what he had been doing to him, and her husband came in with Herman and said, "Here we are come home, Mamma, Herman and me, and we are very tired, it was so crowded coming." And then he whispered to her, "You be good to Herman, Mamma. He didn't mean to make us so much trouble." And so old Mrs. Creeder held in what she felt was so strong in her to say to her Herman. She just said very stiffly to him, "I'm glad to see you come home today, Herman." Then she went to arrange it all with Mrs. Hayden. Herman was now again just like he always had been, sullen and very good and very quiet, and always ready to do whatever his mother and his father wanted. Tuesday morning came. Herman got his new clothes on and went with his father and his mother to stand up for an hour and get married. Lena was there in her new dress and her hat with all the pretty flowers, and she was very nervous, for now she knew she was really very soon to be married. Mrs. Hayden had everything all ready. Everybody was there just as they should be, and very soon Herman Creeder and Lena Maines were married. When everything was really over, they went back to the Creeder house together. They were all now to live together, Lena and Herman and the old father and the old mother, in the house where Mr. Creeder had worked so many years as a tailor, with his son Herman always there to help him. Irish Mary had often said to Lena she never did see how Lena could ever want to have anything to do with Herman Creeder and his dirty, stingy parents. The old Creeders were, to an Irish nature, a stingy, dirty couple. They had not the free-hearted, thoughtless, fighting, mud-bespattered, ragged, peat-smoked cabin dirt that Irish Mary knew and could forgive and love. Theirs was the German dirt of saving, of being dowdy and loose and foul in your clothes, so as to save them, and yourself in washing, having your hair greasy, to save it in the soap and drying, having your clothes dirty, not in freedom, but because so it was cheaper, keeping the house close and smelly, because so it cost less to get it heated, living so poorly, not only so as to save money, but so they should never even know themselves that they had it, working all the time, not only because from their nature they just had to, and because it made them money, but also that they never could be put in any way to make them spend their money. This was the place Lena now had for her home, and to her it was very different than it could be for an Irish Mary. She too was German and was thrifty, though she was always so dreamy and not there. Lena was always careful with things, and she always saved her money, for that was the only way she knew how to do it. She never had taken care of her own money, and she never had thought how to use it. Lena Maines had been, before she was Mrs. Herman Creeder, always clean and decent in her clothes and in her person, but it was not because she ever thought about it or really needed so to have it. It was the way her people did in the German country where she came from, and her Aunt Matilda and the good German cook, who always scolded, had kept her on, and made her, with their scoldings, always more careful to keep clean and to wash real often. But there was no deep need in all this for Lena, and so, though Lena did not like the old Creeders, though she really did not know that, she did not think about their being stingy, dirty people. Herman Kreder was cleaner than the old people, just because it was his nature to keep cleaner. But he was used to his mother and his father, and he never thought that they should keep things cleaner. And Herman, too, always saved all his money, except for that little beer he drank when he went out with other men of an evening the way he always liked to do it. And he never thought of any other way to spend it. His father had always kept all the money for them, and he always was doing business with it. And then, too, Herman really had no money, for he always had worked for his father, and his father had never thought to pay him. And so they began all four to live in the Kreder house together, and Lena began soon with it to look careless and a little dirty, and to be more lifeless with it, and nobody ever noticed much what Lena wanted, and she never really knew herself what she needed. The only real trouble that came to Lena with their living all four there together was the way old Mrs. Kreder scolded. Lena had always been used to being scolded, but this scolding of old Mrs. Kreder was very different from the way she ever before had had to endure it. Herman, now he was married to her, really liked Lena very well. He did not care very much about her, but she never was a bother to him, being there around him. Only when his mother worried and was nasty to them because Lena was so careless, and did not know how to save things right for them with their eating, and all the other ways with money that the old woman had to save it. Herman Kreder had always done everything his mother and his father wanted, but he did not really love his parents very deeply. With Herman it was always only that he hated to have any struggle. It was always all right with him when he could just go along and do the same thing over every day with his working, and not to hear things, and not to have people make him listen to their anger. And now his marriage, and he just knew it would, was making trouble for him. It made him hear more what his mother was always saying with her scolding. He had to really hear it now because Lena was there, and she was so scared and dull always when she heard it. Herman knew very well with his mother. It was all right if one ate very little and worked hard all day and did not hear her when she scolded, the way Herman always had done, before they were so foolish about his getting married and having a girl there to be all the time around him. And now he had to help her so the girl could learn too, not to hear it when his mother scolded, and not to look so scared, and not to eat much, and always to be sure to save it. Herman really did not know very well what he could do to help Lena to understand it. He could never answer his mother back to help Lena. That never would make things any better for her, and he never could feel in himself any way to comfort Lena, to make her strong not to hear his mother in all the awful ways she always scolded. It just worried Herman to have it like that all the time around him. Herman did not know much about how a man could make a struggle with a mother, to do much to keep her quiet, and indeed Herman never knew much how to make a struggle against anyone who really wanted to have anything very badly. Herman all his life never wanted anything so badly that he would really make a struggle against anyone to get it. Herman all his life only wanted to live regular and quiet, and not talk much, and to do the same way every day like every other with his working. And now his mother had made him get married to this Lena, and now with his mother making all that scolding, he had all this trouble and this worry always on him. Mrs. Hayden did not see Lena now very often. She had not lost her interest in her niece Lena, but Lena could not come much to her house to see her. It would not be right. Now Lena was a married woman. And then, too, Mrs. Hayden had her hands full just then with her two daughters, for she was getting them ready to find them good husbands. And then, too, her own husband now worried her very often about her always spoiling that boy of hers, so he would be sure to turn out no good and be a disgrace to a German family, and all because his mother always spoiled him. All these things were very worrying now to Mrs. Hayden, but still she wanted to be good to Lena, though she could not see her very often. She only saw her when Mrs. Hayden went to call on Mrs. Kreder, or when Mrs. Kreder came to see Mrs. Hayden, and that never could be very often. Then, too, these days, Mrs. Hayden could not scold Lena. Mrs. Kreder was always there with her, and it would not be right to scold Lena when Mrs. Kreder was there, who had now the real right to do it. And so her aunt always said nice things now to Lena, and though Mrs. Hayden sometimes was a little worried when she saw Lena looking sad and not careful, She did not have time just then to really worry much about it. End of section 30. Section 31 of 3 Lives. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jacquelyn Bengfort. 3 Lives by Gertrude STEIN. Section 31, The Gentle Lena. Lena now, never any more, saw the girls she always used to sit with. She had no way now to see them, and it was not in Lena's nature to search out ways to see them, nor did she now ever think much of the days when she had been used to see them. They never any of them had come to the Creeder house to see her. Not even Irish Mary had ever thought to come to see her. Lena had been soon forgotten by them. They had soon passed away from Lena, and now Lena never thought any more that she had ever known them. The only one of her old friends who tried to know what Lena liked and what she needed, and who always made Lena come to see her, was the good German cook who had always scolded. She now scolded Lena hard for letting herself go so, and going out when she was looking so untidy. "I know you going to have a baby, Lena, but that's no way for you to be looking. I am ashamed most to see you come and sit here in my kitchen, looking so sloppy and like you never used to, Lena. I never see anybody like you, Lena. Herman is very good to you. You always say so, and he don't treat you bad, even though you don't deserve to have anybody good to you. You so careless all the time, Lena, letting yourself go like you never had anybody tell you but was the right way you should know how to be looking. No, Lena, I don't see no reason you should let yourself go so and look so untidy, Lena, so I am ashamed to see you sit there looking so ugly, Lena. No, Lena, that ain't no way ever I see a woman make things come out better, letting herself go so every way and crying all the time like as if you had real trouble. I never wanted to see you marry Herman Creeder, Lena. I knew that you got to stand with that old woman always, and that old man, he is so stingy too, and he don't say things out, but he ain't any better in his heart than his wife with her bad ways. I know that, Lena. I know they don't hardly give you enough to eat, Lena. I am real sorry for you, Lena. You know that, Lena. But that ain't any way to be going round so untidy, Lena, even if you have got all that trouble. You never see me do like that, Lena, though sometimes I got a headache so I can't see to stand to be working hardly, and nothing comes right with all my cooking. But I always see, Lena, I look decent. That's the only way a German girl can make things come out right, Lena. You hear me what I am saying to you, Lena? Now you eat something nice, Lena. I got it all ready for you. And you wash up and be careful, Lena, and the baby will come all right to you, and then I make your Aunt Matilda see that you live in a house soon all alone with Herman and your baby, and then everything go better for you. You hear me what I say to you, Lena. Now, don't let me ever see you come looking like this any more, Lena, and you just stop with that always crying. You ain't got no reason to be sitting here now with all that crying. I never see anybody have trouble it did them any good to do the way you are doing, Lena. You hear me, Lena. You go home now, and you be good the way I tell you, Lena, and I see what I can do. I make your Aunt Matilda make old Mrs. Creeder let you be till you get your baby all right. Now don't you be scared and so silly, Lena. I don't like to see you act so, Lena, when really you got a nice man, and so many things really any girl should be grateful to be having. Now you go home, Lena, today, and you do the way I say to you, and I see what I can do to help you. Yes, Mrs. Aldrich, said the good German woman to her mistress later. Yes, Mrs. Aldrich, that's the way it is with them girls when they want so to get married. They don't know when they got it, good Mrs. Aldrich. They never know what it is they're really wanting when they got it, Mrs. Aldrich. There's that poor Lena. She just been here crying and looking so careless, so I scold her. But that was no good, that marrying for that poor Lena, Mrs. Aldrich. She do look so pale and sad now, Mrs. Aldrich. It just break my heart to see her. She was a good girl with Lena, Mrs. Aldrich, and I never had no trouble with her like I got with so many young girls nowadays, Mrs. Aldrich, and I never see any girl any better to work right than our Lena. And now she got to stand it all the time with that old woman, Mrs. Creeder. My, Mrs. Aldrich, she is a bad old woman to her. I never see, Mrs. Aldrich, how old people can be so bad to young girls and not have no kind of patience with them. If Lena could only live with her Herman, he ain't so bad the way men are, Mrs. Aldrich, but He is just the way always his mother wants him. He ain't got no spirit in him, and so I don't really see no help for that poor Lena. I know her aunt, Mrs. Hayden, meant it all right for her, Mrs. Aldrich. But poor Lena, it would be better for her if her Herman had stayed there in New York that time he went away to leave her. I don't like the way Lena is looking now, Mrs. Aldrich. She looks like as if she don't have no life left in her hardly, Mrs. Aldrich. She just drags around, looks so dirty, and after all the pains I always took to teach her, and to keep her nice in her ways and looking. It don't do no good to them, for them girls to get married, Mrs. Aldrich. They are much better when they only know it, to stay in a good place when they got it, and keep on regular with their working. I don't like it the way Lena looks now, Mrs. Aldrich. I wish I knew some way to help that poor Lena, Mrs. Aldrich. But she is a bad old woman, that old Mrs. Creeder, Herman's mother. I speak to Mrs. Hayden real soon, Mrs. Aldrich. I see what we can do now to help that poor Lena. These were really bad days for poor Lena. Herman always was real good to her, and now he even sometimes tried to stop his mother from scolding Lena. She ain't well now, Mamma. You let her be now, you hear me? You tell me what it is you want she should be doing, I tell her. I see she does it right, just the way you want it, Mamma. You let be, I say now, Mamma, with that always scolding Lena. You let be, I say now. You wait till she is feeling better. Herman was getting really strong to struggle, for he could see that Lena, with that baby working hard inside her, really could not stand it any longer with his mother and the awful ways she always scolded. It was a new feeling Herman now had inside him that made him feel he was strong to make a struggle. It was new for Herman Creeder really to be wanting something, but Herman wanted strongly now to be a father, and he wanted badly that his baby should be a boy and healthy. Herman never had cared really very much about his mother and his father, though always, all his life, he had done everything just as they wanted, and he had never really cared much about his wife Lena, though he always had been very good to her, and had always tried to keep his mother off her with the awful way she always scolded. But to be really a father of a little baby, that feeling took hold of Herman very deeply. He was almost ready, so as to save his baby from all trouble, to really make a strong struggle with his mother, and with his father too, if he would not help him to control his mother. Sometimes Herman even went to Mrs. Hayden to talk all this trouble over. They decided then together it was better to wait there all four together for the baby, and Herman could make Mrs. Creeder stop a little with her scolding, and then, when Lena was a little stronger, Herman should have his own house for her, next door to his father, so he could always be there to help him in his working, but so they could eat and sleep in a house where the old woman could not control them, and they could not hear her awful scolding. And so things went on the same way a little longer. Poor Lena was not feeling any joy to have a baby. She was scared the way she had been when she was so sick on the water. She was scared now every time when anything would hurt her. She was scared and still and lifeless, and sure that every minute she would die. Lena had no power to be strong in this kind of trouble. She could only sit still and be scared and dull and lifeless, and sure that every minute she would die. Before very long, Lena had her baby. He was a good, healthy little boy, the baby. Herman cared very much to have the baby. When Lena was a little stronger, he took a house next door to the old couple, so he and his own family could eat and sleep and do the way they wanted. This did not seem to make much change now for Lena. She was just the same as when she was waiting with her baby. She just dragged around and was careless with her clothes and all lifeless, and she acted always and lived on just as if she had no feeling. She always did everything regular with the work, the way she always had to do it, but she never got back any spirit in her. Herman was always good and kind, and always helped her with her working. He did everything he knew to help her. He always did all the active new things in the house and for the baby. Lena did what she had to do the way she always had been taught it. She always just kept going now with her working, and she was always careless and dirty and a little dazed and lifeless. Lena never got any better in herself of this way of being that she had had ever since she had been married. Mrs. Hayden never saw any more of her niece Lena. Mrs. Hayden had now so much trouble with her own house, and her daughters getting married, and her boy, who was growing up, and who always was getting so much worse to manage. She knew she had done right by Lena. Herman Creeder was a good man. She would be glad to get one so good sometimes for her own daughters. and now they had a home to live in together, separate from the old people who had made their trouble for them. Mrs. Hayden felt she had done very well by her niece Lena, and she never thought now she needed any more to go and see her. Lena would do very well now without her aunt to trouble herself any more about her. The good German cook, who had always scolded, still tried to do her duty like a mother to poor Lena. It was very hard now to do right by Lena. Lena never seemed to hear now what anyone was saying to her. Herman was always doing everything he could to help her. Herman always, when he was home, took good care of the baby. Herman loved to take care of his baby. Lena never thought to take him out or to do anything she didn't have to. The good cook sometimes made Lena come to see her. Lena would come with her baby and sit there in the kitchen and watch the good woman cooking and listen to her sometimes a little, the way she used to, while the good German woman scolded her for going around looking so careless when now she had no trouble, and sitting there so dull, and always being just so thankless. Sometimes Lena would wake up a little and get back into her face her old, gentle, patient, and unsuffering sweetness, but mostly Lena did not seem to hear much when the good German woman scolded. Lena always liked it when Mrs. Aldrich, her good mistress, spoke to her kindly, and then Lena would seem to go back and feel herself to be like she was when she had been in service. But mostly Lena just lived along and was careless in her clothes, and dull and lifeless. By and by Lena had 2 more little babies. Lena was not so much scared now when she had the babies. She did not seem to notice very much when they hurt her, and she never seemed to feel very much now about anything that happened to her. They were very nice babies, all these 3 that Lena had, and Herman took good care of them always. Herman never really cared much about his wife, Lena. The only things Herman ever really cared for were his babies. Herman always was very good to his children. He always had a gentle, tender way when he held them. He learned to be very handy with them. He spent all the time he was not working with them. By and by he began to work all day in his own home, so that he could have his children always in the same room with him. Lena always was more and more lifeless, and Herman now mostly never thought about her. He more and more took all the care of their 3 children. He saw to their eating right, and their washing, and he dressed them every morning, and he taught them the right way to do things, and he put them to their sleeping, and he was now always every minute with them. Then there was to come to them a 4th baby. Lena went to the hospital nearby to have the baby. Lena seemed to be going to have much trouble with it. When the baby was come out at last, it was, like its mother, lifeless. While it was coming, Lena had grown very pale and sicker. When it was all over, Lena had died too, and nobody knew just how it had happened to her. The good German cook, who had always scolded Lena, and had always, to the last day, tried to help her, was the only one who ever missed her. She remembered how nice Lena had looked all the time she was in service with her, and how her voice had been so gentle and sweet-sounding, and how she always was a good girl, and how she never had to have any trouble with her, the way she always had with all the other girls who had been taken into the house to help her. The good cook sometimes spoke so of Lena when she had time to have a talk with Mrs. Aldrich, and this was all the remembering there now ever was of Lena. Herman Kreder now always lived very happy, very gentle, very quiet, very well content alone with his 3 children. He never had a woman any more to be all the time around him. He always did all his own work in his house. When he was through every day with the work he was always doing for his father. Herman always was alone, and he always worked alone until his little ones were big enough to help him. Herman Kreder was very well content now, and he always lived very regular and peaceful, and with every day just like the next one, always alone now with his 3 good, gentle children. Finis. End of section 31. End of 3 Lives by Gertrude STEIN.